Remember the dot-com boom when every little building in Silicon Valley rented at a huge price, and a few months later, they were about a third of them were vacant? There are these periods in capitalism, and I've been around for a long time, and my policy has always been to just ride them out. And I think that's what shareholders do. In fact, what shareholders actually do is a lot of them crowd in to buying stocks on frenzy, frequently on credit, because they see that they're going up. And of course, that's a very dangerous way to invest. Shareholders should be more sensible and not crowd into stocks and just buy them just because they're going up and they like to gamble. And of course, Kipling once wrote a famous poem called The Women. Concluding line was, you should learn about women from him instead of yourself. But he says, I know you won't follow my advice.
Many observers see market behavior that reminds them of the dot-com bubble, wild speculation, endless SPACs and IPOs soaring on their first day of trading. Do you agree that there is a close parallel to the late 90s and this therefore, quote, must end badly?
Yes, I think it must end badly, but I don't know when.
You mentioned we're in a big bubble. Can you elaborate on that, and how is this likely to play out?
Well, that, of course, is a very intelligent question and a very difficult question. When you throw money, when you print money on the scale that modern nations are printing it, Japan, the United States, Europe, etc., we're getting into new territory in terms of size. The Japanese bought back not only a lot of their own debt, but a lot of their common stocks. So the Federal Reserve System, you can't imagine how much money printing Japan has done. And they haven't had all that much inflation, and it's still a very admirable civilization. In fact, you could argue that Japan is one of the more admirable civilizations in the whole world. And in spite of all this very extreme government money printing they've done, and they haven't had terrible consequences. Now they've had 25 years of stasis with living standards not improving very much. I don't think that came from their macroeconomic policies. I think that came from the rise of tough competition for their export powerhouse from China and Korea. But at any rate, it's weird what's happening, and nobody knows for sure how it's going to work out. I think it's encouraging that Japan can print as much money as it has and remain as civilized and calm and admirable as it has. And so I hope to God the United States has similar happy outcome. But I think the Japanese are better adapted for stasis than we are. I think it's a duty-filled, civilized bunch of people, a lot of them older, not many young people, and they just suck it in and cope. In our country, we have terrible tensions. It's way harder to run a country which is not monoethnic like Japan. There's some professor at Harvard that has written extensively on this subject. It's way harder to run a nation like the United States with different ethnicities and groups and so forth than it is to run Japan. Japan is basically sort of a monoethnic civilization which is proud of its ethnicity, and of course they can cope with it. There's never been anything quite like what we're doing now, and we do know from what's happened in other nations, if you try and print too much money, it eventually causes terrible trouble. And we are closer to terrible trouble than we've been in the past, but it may still be a long way off. I certainly hope so.
He says, what are your current thoughts on the inflationary environment? And please compare and contrast it to the 1970s.
When Volcker, after the 70s, took the prime rate to 20% and the government was paying 15% on its government bonds, that was a horrible recession. Lasted a long time, caused a lot of agony. And I certainly hope we're not going there again. I think the conditions that allowed Volcker to do that without an interference from the politicians were very unusual. And I think in 2020 hindsight, it was a good thing that he did it. I would not predict that our modern politicians will be as willing to permit a new Volcker to get that tough with the economy and bring on that kind of a recession. So I think the new troubles are likely to be different from the old troubles. The troubles that come to us could be worse than what Volcker was dealing with. Think of all the Latin American countries that print too much money. They get strongmen and so forth. That's what Plato said happened in the early Greek city-state democracies. One person, one vote, a lot of equality, and you get demagogues, and the demagogues lather up the population, and pretty soon you don't have your democracy anymore. I don't think that was a crazy idea on Plato's part. I think that accurately described what happened in Greece way back then, and it's happened again and again and again in Latin America. We don't want to go there. At least I don't.
Charlie, last February, you spoke about the wretched excess in the financial system. Given the developments over the past year, could you give us an update on your assessment of wretched excess in the system? Where does it appear most egregious?
Well, it's most egregious in the momentum trading by novice investors lured in by new types of brokerage operation like Robinhood. And I think all of this activity is regrettable. I think civilization would do better without it. You'll remember that when the first big bubble came, which was the South Sea bubble in England back in the 1700s, it created such havoc eventually when it blew up that England didn't allow hardly any public trading in securities of any companies for decades thereafter. It just created the most unholy mess. So human greed and the aggression of the brokerage community creates these bubbles from time to time. And I think wise people just stay out of them. We have a stock market which some people use like a gambling parlor. And the transactions of the people who love the gambling parlor aspect of the business and those who want to make long-term investments to take care of their old age and so forth. I mean, you muddle it in one market and it goes out of control because the stock market becomes an ideal gambling parlor activity. I don't think that ought to have been allowed either. If I were the dictator of the world, I would have some kind of a tax on short-term gains that made the stock market very much less liquid and drove out this marriage of gambling parlor and legitimate capital development of the country. What we're getting is wretched excess and danger for the country. And everybody loves it because it's like a bunch of people get drunk at a party. They're having so much fun getting drunk that they don't think about the consequences. This is serious stuff. We should, but it's awfully hard. A lot of people like a drunken brawl, and so far those are the people that are winning. And a lot of people are making money out of our brawl.